Well, hello, everyone. I'm John Morris. As you guys may know, I head up the US for Fantom. But before I begin, I want to say a big thank you to obviously to Harry Ye, his team, and my dear friend Simone, aka the other Pomp, for organizing such an amazing event in such short order. So maybe we should get after it, shall we? The title of my talk today is Web3 Beyond Punks, Adaptive Societies, Emergent Value Systems, and Uncommon Opportunities. And I'll be honest with you, I already regret the title. It's unnecessarily long, particularly for a 15-minute talk, but let's see what we can get through. So let's start with adaptive societies. Well, as a group or society, I think it's important to first ask ourselves, why are we all so drawn to Web3? You know, it's basically the how we got here question. Are we all masochists who just really enjoy physically or intellectually demanding stuff? Maybe, that could be part of it. Or is it something deeper than that? Is it possible that we all share some unspoken common experience or emotion? And I think the answer to that question is yes. In my humble view, we are all the disillusioned. We all have felt disenfranchised, and we all have been financially disempowered, at least at some point. Specifically over the last, 10 to 50 years, we've all witnessed traditional financial assets, like stocks, real estate, just rise to these unattainable levels and bringing with it this massive wealth disparity, the whole 99, 1% thing. And sadly, it's engendered this latent dysphoria in many of us, one which has brought on feelings of anxiety and hopelessness. Basically, like when you put your head down on the pillow tonight, you say to yourself, man, I'm not going to make it in this game. And to make matters worse, we all hate the damn game. We hated having to coexist with these obviously nefarious, self-indulgent actors who created and took advantage of others with this biased rulemaking or creating these unfair, asymmetrical information flows, that only benefited themselves. And I would say, hell, like no rational person should want to wake up every morning and enter into that Faustian bargain, when you're selling your soul, just to play in that highly rigged game. And worse over, it was a game that was designed to dramatically suboptimize your return on time, essentially making you a slave to their system. But it was the only game in town. And there's really no other way to make a living, right? So to grossly oversimplify it, you either worked for a nonprofit, ate ramen noodles and slept like a baby, or you worked at a bank, ate some lobster, and would have to drink away your guilt before going to bed. But suffice it to say, it was a really bad game, and it still is a really bad game. But this is not intended to be a sob story. This is intended to be a story of empowerment. So as the old adage goes, you either adapt or you die. And I'd argue that we all realized, consciously or subconsciously, that the only hope for us in this new world was going to be to create a whole new system of values and promote this better world underpinned by those values. Okay, so let's maybe talk briefly about these new or emergent value systems, specifically so we can help identify opportunities at the end of the talk. Okay, number 2, emergent value systems. I believe the unsaid but commonly understood purpose statement of our newly adapted society or community goes something like this. We should all be building and promoting technologies that, first and foremost, are fully egalitarian and merit-based. Hopefully, we can all together root out the previous advantages held by those with stellar financial or academic pedigrees or family connections, etc. Second, I would personally really like us to promote creating positive sum environments, not just zero-sum trading games. I mean, I love zero-sum trading games, don't get me wrong. They're fun as hell, and fun is important, but they're not necessarily as enduring as positive sum games. Number 3, we should build systems that align with our morals. This is obvious, and something that is not at odds with that as we move forward. And lastly, I want to encourage us to really focus on enhancing the returns on a user's time, particularly as we're now squarely in the engagement economy with great technology like Simone's over at Overdrive leading the way. Okay, those are the lofty and maybe utopian purpose statements, but we need to ask ourselves, what have we seen in practice? And how have these ideals actually manifested themselves? And from my standpoint, I've seen three characteristics emerge from our community. We are very subversive. And that's not a bad thing, actually. I mean, we're all aware of the sort of quit the bank narrative. We intentionally want to starve them of resources, so that they come over and ultimately empower our own system. Uh, and secondly, we've all are keenly aware of sort of the GameStop phenomenon, which is essentially kind of giving the finger to the man and hitting him where it hurts the most. So, and then second, we're incredibly supportive. It's almost like cult-like support for one another. I mean, if it's Diamond Hands or Spartans or whatever it is, we'll rally around each other. And the next characteristic I've seen is that we all, we're all somewhat good people. We have this strong desire to empower and to enrich each other. It's the whole narrative, we're all going to make it, where we build and buy seemingly valueless JPEGs like punks and squiggles and umans, love the umans, rocks, etc., to help our artists and creatives. And I know there's much more to it than that, than just supporting them, but that is an element in my mind. So now comes the practical question. What does this all mean, and where are these supposed uncommon opportunities? Well, and then this is the last section, the uncommon opportunities section. Well, what I just described is actually tantamount to a seismic shift in culture. Crypto, in my opinion, is a cultural revolution as much as it is a financial or technological revolution. I mean, what was it that Mike Novogratz used to always say, the fellow from Galaxy? The banks are coming, the herd is coming. Well, I would say now the DAOs, the games, and the consumer brands are coming. People in the old Web 2 system are waking up, and they're realizing that this cultural shift is persistent, it's robust, and it is absolutely gaining speed. Now every Web 2 platform is asking themselves, holy shit, what is our Web 3 strategy? They're a bit lost, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to stay relevant. They understandably fear Web 3 right now because they believe it undercuts and diminishes the value of their cultural empires that they've spent 5 to 20 years building. And for us, that fear is healthy. It's a forcing function. It's what we need to get them in the door. But I think what we need to communicate to the Web3 community, and what they're currently missing, is that Web3 has the potential to be highly accretive to their businesses, not destructive, both from a financial point of view, but especially from a consumer engagement point of view. So if you believe there's any truth in this little tale I just spun for you, and you guys may all just think I'm crazy, I think you may want to consider looking into some of the following opportunities. First, maybe consider building out the tools or the toolkit for DAOs. These are the new communities that will support and advance our Web3 movement. They're here now, and as many of you know, they really are in dire need of help. Two, work on building the tools to bring those Web 2, maybe slightly frightened platforms over to the new Web 3 world. Help bring them to the light, and maybe help them avoid some of the painful rite of passage we all went through and the thousands of dollars we spent playing around with Ethereum. So, and there are guys already working on this, like the good fellows over at Blockchain Foundry. But there are also many other avenues that we can put together and organize to help ease the transition for these Web 2 platforms. Three, and this is a personal one, I'd love to see better forms of trust. As this Web 3 world evolves, we want to empower discernment. I'd like to see us build more innovative on-chain, but maybe less creepy credentialing. And I'd also like to see us find a way to move away from relying on third-party audits. And maybe that's a utopian ideal too. But the last one, and this is maybe the obvious sort of practical or commercial one, is focus on building metaverse enabling or enabled technologies. It could be stuff for consumer brands like fashion or clothing items that have dual purpose in both the physical and the digital worlds, kind of like what the NFT guys create. As we all know, metaverses will open up a huge number of clients for consumer brands, for music businesses, for games. Games are culture, and just about anything else that kind of falls into that big, cultural pot. So, maybe to wrap up, to paraphrase Jake from Coin Fund, if you're familiar with that fund, NFTs are not just fun, unique assets that we can finally hold domain over. They really are these tiny little vessels of hope, representing a better and more expansive future for all of us. They're transforming society right underneath our feet, and soon it will affect the way we all live our lives. In my view, it's time to go all in, and I certainly am, and I know the team is too. That's all I've got, guys. Thanks very much. I really just also want to say that I am so grateful for all of your support. I know the whole team is. And as always, please let us know how we can help. And I'm glad to answer questions.
So do we have any questions in our audience for John at all? It'd be wonderful to have a couple for him. Has anyone got anything they would like to ask John at this time?
That stage seems so lonely. Apologies about there.
Anyone want to ask anything of John? So John, what's next? What's coming next? What else is going to happen? Talk to me.
I appreciate you facilitating the conversation. So, I think what is next, at least from a fan perspective, is a really keen focus on games and consumer brands. We're, without sharing too much, we're talking to dozens of games right now that, cover the whole spectrum from play to earn, win to earn, all the different new economies inside of games. And we're talking to a lot of really great lifestyle brands that have finally got the message that to survive and thrive, they need to figure out how to make the transition over into the digital world. And to do it, they can't just dip their toe in it. To me, there's nothing more inauthentic than just, doing a single drop, so to speak, an NFT drop. I think they need to fully commit to that wave, drop in, and just go full bore.
What do you think are the major stumbling blocks or points of resistance for people being immersive in this world and adapting to it?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. I mean, it obviously varies by sort of cohort or business, but if I'm taking the consumer brand model, it's right now they don't know how to do it. That's probably the simplest one. I mean, I could say that the tools aren't there, but they're emerging. They're still nascent, but they're emerging. I don't think they understand how they can play in that new world yet. What is their role in the metaverse? Are they just, a storefront that sells their gear that looks just like the gear they sell down the street? I don't think that's it. I think it's a consumer engagement platform. It's a convening forum for their fans. It is a way for them to catalyze an American fan base so that it becomes a network for them that's accretive to their business, not just another point of sale store.
And do you think it's providing far more opportunities than were available to us before?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just thinking again, just from the consumer brand standpoint, these folks, they already have storefronts in every geography across the world and have tried probably every strategy in the book to sell gear to people, and they always evolve it. This is a paradigm shift in engaging with our customers. They have the potential now to establish this persistent continuum with that client for not just one day, but for the next 20 years. And it's just a very different value than it is about, they no longer need to rent their own customers back from the search agencies. They can just deal with them directly.
And I want to ask you, what about kind of on a regulatory front? Because we all know, regulations can be a stickler for people to get around. Is that causing any obstacles for people? And how do we regulate this more than it is already?
I'm no policy wonk, and I certainly don't want to be like a regulatory fudster out here. But I would say it's just something we need to be aware of. The nice thing, and maybe this is just temporary, is that this new Web3 movement that I'm talking about, games or apparel or DAOs, in some ways seems to fall just slightly outside the purview of the regulatory agencies. Not completely, of course. Like DAOs are wrestling with how to figure out their LLCs. Games are wondering if those in-game assets are viewed as, I don't know, securities, which I'm absolutely sure that they're not. But they just have to be keenly aware of where the sort of the zeitgeist is or the state of mind of the regulators are. Just make sure that they're navigating that path.